welcome everyone to the this public meeting on the Mountain Division Trail that we are engaged in a project on, and I'm representing a team on the town engineer in Windham. We have a big team, a relatively good sized team here, and involved in this project. And we've got Jenny Franceschi, who's the planning director, planning and code enforcement director for Westbrook. And I think is Rebecca on?
Rebecca's not.
Exactly, yeah, and not online either. So, and Amanda Lassard is the planning director in Windham.
I'm hiding behind the camera for.
Because, yeah, actually, I don't know, I don't think I've done one of these hybrid meetings before, so I'm not sure exactly which direction I could look, but
It's a hybrid meeting, that's
so hybrid means that we have everyone here is live, I guess, or is in person, and then we also have a Zoom login. So there are people
Oh, okay.
watching the meeting online. And we are recording the meeting because this is a public meeting for a DOT project, and we do public meetings, so we need to capture all the comments that come up on the project. And we have, did I introduce you?
Nope.
No. Don Ettinger is the principal at Goral Palmer, and he is leading the project. And then you'll shortly see Jared Winchenbach, who's the project manager and engineer at Goral Palmer also. He's going to go through a bunch of the details, some of the details on the project. So this project is also is a DOT funded project. So Jerry Dostey is the project manager, and he's on tuning in by Zoom. And so DOT is providing, I think it's about 75% of the funding on this project. And then Windham and Westbrook are providing $100,000 combined for this initial engineering phase of the work. So just a little bit of, a little bit of background is that this section that we're talking about, and the reason Westbrook and Windham are both in on it, is that the part of the trail that we're looking to expand starts at Bridge Street in Westbrook. It goes about a mile and a quarter in Westbrook, or is it a mile and a half? About a mile and a half to a mile and a quarter. And then it goes another 3.5 to 3/4, 3.5 to 3 3/4 miles in Windham. For a total of about 5 miles, and it goes up to Main Street in Windham. So this project what we're presenting to you tonight is the preliminary design report for this project. And the funding that we have so far and our scope of work so far is the engineering phase, not the construction phase of the project. That would come later. So right now we put together draft preliminary design plans, done a preliminary design report, and we're reviewing that internally with the engineering team and with the Westbrook and Windham and DOT, and then also getting comments from the public. And that's the purpose of our meeting tonight. So it's to make sure that we get input from people that are in the community, that are along the trail, so that then we can go on to the next phase, which would be what's called the project impacts complete phase, and then on to the final design and engineering for the trail. So this is a very important step in the process. And maybe before I turn it over to Goral Palmer, another little bit of history is that back in 2012, a preliminary design was completed. And I think the funding was through the Maine Community.
Was that a type of grant?
It was a transportation quality improved community program. So a preliminary design was done at that time, but then the funding dried up and it got put on the shelf. And last year, Westbrook and Windham applied for a grant with DOT and got this funding to basically update and put the design into current conditions and standards. So, so this 5 mile section would basically would create a trail from Bridge Street in Westbrook all the way up to just about Tobago Lake, Route 35 in Standish. So there's that 5 mile section already completed, which probably many of you have been on, from Main Street and Windham up to Route 35. And this would extend that section to 10 miles. So we make a 10 miles of continuous, really good multi-use trail, paved multi-use trail. So a 10-foot paved trail. So I'll let Gore Palmer provide some of the details on that, but in a nutshell, that's what we're looking at. With that, turn it over to Jared Winchenbach, who's somewhere. He's in the office and he's going to be going through a series of slides to explain some of the details on the project. So there he is, right there. So, and we'll open it up for questions for us as we go through this. Thank you.
Amanda, am I able to, it says right now that host is disabled screen sharing. Is there a way you can get me to share that?
Yes. You should be okay now.
Yep, very good. Cool. All right. Let me know when you can see it. Should be the presentation. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you for everybody who attended in person as well as on the Zoom call. One thing I didn't think I heard Mark say, just if you are in person, there's a sign-in sheet that we just want to make sure everybody signs into, so we can keep a kind of a tab on who's here, and it helps the main DOT's their process and making sure we check all the boxes there. If you're online on Zoom call, that's fine. We'll have I think you had to register to kind of get in anyway, so that works. We can do it that way. So let me just get my pointer out. There we go. So we're here to talk about, like Mark said, it's a main DOT LAP project, Mountain Division Trail, Westbrook and Windham. Win number for this project 26576.00. And this is the first public meeting for it in the last 10 years. Mark did a good job introducing everybody. This is kind of just a list of everybody who's involved in the design as it currently stands. We do have sub-consultants as well who are helping us out along the way. So what I'd like to do, Mark already pretty much covered this, so I'll just skim through it real quick, but I'd like to give you guys a quick update on the project history. Take a look at the big picture, the overall trail, kind of like what Mark said, there's an existing section of this trail just north of where we're looking to build. And then I'll go through just a project description, limit of work real quick. Again, Mark already did a good job touching that. And then I'll move on to the overall design of it and give you a technical presentation on what we're looking to do here. So quick history, like Mark said, this project's been around since 2010-ish. It got put on the shelf. It's now got kicked back off, and we're looking to update the design to current standards. The pictures before you here, this is actually the northern section of the trail. So this is the section from Route 202 up to Route 35 in Standish. I was out on it the other day and took some pictures of it. And so for the most part, our project's looking to do a very similar thing to what you're seeing here. Big picture. Like I just mentioned, so this on your screen on the right side, if you guys, I'm hoping you can see my red cursor here moving up and down. That's Route 202 in Windham. And then if you travel north along this green line, that is the existing Mountain Division Rail Trail. Comes up to the Otter Ponds and bounds out around them where it connects to Route 35, which I believe is Chadbourne Street in Standish. So we travel, our project is starting at Route 202, or actually technically we're ending at Route 202, and we're going south towards Bridge Street in Westbrook. It's approximately, the existing trail is about 5.5 miles. And we're looking to add another 5 miles to it, making it about a 10 to 11 mile trail, which would be pretty cool. Project limits, like Mark had said, so we're starting at Bridge Street down here in the bottom right, and we're traveling north up to Route 202, which is Main Street in Windham. There is the town line, doesn't show up on this graphic, unfortunately, but it's right in between Russo Road and Stillwater Drive. As Mark had said, Westbrook's about a mile and a quarter. Windham has about 3 3/4 of the total length of the project. One thing to note, so we are going to be crossing, so Pierce Street, Stillwater Drive, Russo Road, Madison Falls Road, Depot Street, and Main Street. They're all going to have trail crossings, proposed trails crossings as part of this project. There's existing sidewalks on all of them except Madison Falls Road obviously does not, and Russo Road doesn't as well. But the rest of them we're going to connect into existing infrastructure and tie everything together as we kind of go. And you'll see that in the future slides. Quick project description. Again, you see the same pictures. These are the existing pictures of the existing trail north of Route 202. What we're looking to do with our trail is very similar. So we're going to do a 10-foot wide paved trail, 1-foot gravel shoulders on either side. What you'll see, we're going to have similar, we'll have sections of fencing, sections where you may have retaining walls, sections with ditching along either or both edges. One thing to know with the fencing, we're proposing fencing in areas to protect pedestrians and bicyclists. So it's basically in areas of steep fills or on the top of retaining walls, as you'd see in this middle picture here. Those are the areas that you'll see proposed for fencing. The only other location that you may see fencing is with a rail with trail project, as this is. When you get within closer to the, if the edge of path is closer than 15 feet to the nearest railroad rail, they require a fence in between them just to make sure that people aren't trespassing onto the rails. So you will see some fence on the railroad side, and it's not necessarily because there's steep grades there. It's mostly just to keep the railroad happy and keep their corridor intact. One thing I will note here, this is a typical section. I'll get to that a little bit later. Really, the main purpose of this graphic was just to show we have a 10-foot trail, 1-foot shoulder here, one foot shoulder here, 1-foot shoulder there, and a 10-foot trail in between, sections of fencing, sections of ditching, but that's basically what we're looking to do. Oop. I don't know what just happened there. Went backwards on me. So what I'd like to do now, apologize for that. What I'd like to do now is go through. So if you're attending this in person, you're going to see on the side walls there, you're going to see the color hearing plans. Those are basically a colored in version of our design to kind of make it easier to understand what we're trying to do and just make it more visually appealing. And so what we're doing is, or what I'd like to do now is kind of explain, there's 3 views that you're going to see. I'll walk you through all 3 of them just so you're aware of it. If you're in viewing this remotely, I'm pretty sure it may be both the city of Westbrook and the town of Windham are going to post these to their website. Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong. I assume that most of the graphics will be available online if people want to zoom into certain areas. So,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna just say right now, we did put the black and white drawings on the website, the project website that people were noticed with the QR code and the link. We will upload the color graphics and your PowerPoint presentation and recording of this video on the website.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. So the first view that I want to talk about is called a plan view. And basically what this is, it's a bird's eye view looking straight down on top of the project. You can see our project's overlaid onto a 2021 aerial, so it's relatively current. I want to real quick go over the color scheme that you'll see before you here. The gray path, the gray line, basically the path, that is what you think it is. It'd be the 10-foot wide multi-use trail. These areas where there's black dots on either side, those are basically just limits of fencing. So if you go up and you see a bunch of dots, that's really what it's trying to entail, is these are the limits of fencing. This black and green candy cane color, that is proposed retaining wall. So thinking back 2 slides ago with those pictures, basically there's a deep ravine or a high fills condition or a culvert that we're trying to avoid impacts to. So we're putting in a retaining wall to build up vertically so we don't impact as much. The dark blue that you see in front of you, this is all going to be proposed drainage. So if it's like this with a bunch of arrows, that's proposed ditching. If it's over here where you've got two parallel lines, that's proposed pipes, drainage pipes. And in areas, you'll see dark blue squares. And those are basically proposed catch basins that'll help collect water and drain it where we want it to go. A couple other colors to be aware of on this. The light green is just basically areas that we're going to have to grade into. When we grade into it, we'll have to loam and seed it so that grass grows once we're done. The brown areas are woods entrances. All of the woods entrances that are currently there are all set to remain. We're working them into the design. The brown is basically just us regrading on either side of it so that it works into the path just fine. Two or three more things, just quick. The red line that you see running here with stationing on it or numbers, that's our alignment. All of our plans are based on this. And what it basically is the 10.5-foot offset of the nearest rail. So you can see the railroad right there. This is a 10.5-foot offset of that. Our plans are based on that. Basically, you won't see the path go any closer to the rail than 10.5 feet per Maine DOT standards. And then the only other color is up in this top graphic, you see some yellow. It's kind of hard to distinguish from the green on the video here, but the yellow is just basically whenever we're working in the road, you'll see the yellow color. It just basically means we're going to end up having to pave those areas. The purple line is one thing that I wanted to point out as well. The purple line is the right-of-way line. So basically, you see this line here and this line there. That is the Maine DOT's railroad right-of-way. So the Maine DOT owns between those lines. Everything on the outside of the lines on outside here, or this right-of-way is a little bit wider here. You can see it kind of goes in. Anything on the outside of that, you'll see that's all privately owned. So in cases where you see a name in pink, that's the property owner. That's who owns this parcel in theory. In this instance, we have the town of Windham and the city of Westbrook's city line right there. So that kind of gives you an idea of what you're looking at when you're going through the graphics. The next view I'd like to talk about real quick. The next two graphics aren't nearly as important, but I still want to touch on them real quick. The profile is basically as you walk the trail, this is how you're going to feel. So it's basically if you're walking along this, you're going to walk down into you're going to walk down a hill to a low point, then walk back up high, then walk down again. And basically it's just the hills and valleys as you walk. I will point out that this project is ADA compliant, so we don't have a slope in here higher than 5%. So it's just worth noting at this point that we are ADA compliant through this section. Moving on to the next section, typical sections. What these are, for lack of a better way to describe them, it's basically if you take the road and cut it like a sushi roll, and I mean trail, not road there, I apologize. And what it does is basically you're cutting through and you're looking at the section itself. So you're looking at the gravel depths, the pavement, the ditching, stuff like that. So neither the profile nor the typical section is super important. If you have questions on it, feel free to ask, but it's really not the main focus that we want to try to get on today. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of walk you through the plans. These are going to be kind of close-up snips of what the color herring plans are. I obviously couldn't fit the whole roll plan in each slide. So I tried to break it up and zoom into the points that are more applicable. Bridge Street, we start at Bridge Street in Westbrook. Bridge Street is running top to bottom on the screen here. There's an existing sidewalk on the east side of Bridge Street, which we're tying into. Then obviously the trail will take off from there and go north. Couple things to note on this. We're putting in rectangular rapid flashing beacons. You can see a couple black dots here. For those of you who don't know what those are, there's quite a few of them, I believe, in Westbrook and I believe a few in Windham. If you're up by Depot Street, they just put a couple in. But basically, it's for pedestrians. You push the button, flashers go, and it alerts cars that people are trying to cross there. So we'll have a set of those going in at this location. The three dots that you see right here are bollards. One thing to point out with the bollards, or the proposed bollards that we're using, on the northern section of the trail, the bollards are currently wood posts in a concrete sleeve. These are actually going to be steel bollards with, they're going to be collapsible. So if emergency access needs to go on the path, they can remove the bollards and drive on it if they need to. So that'll be kind of an upgrade over the northern section of the path as it currently stands. Let's just make sure. Yep. So then this is the first section, Bridge Street to Pierce Street. So Bridge Street is on our left here, Pierce Street is on our right, up in the top. It's a little bit hard to see, so I apologize, or at least on my screen, but there's not a ton going on here. The grades are pretty shallow. We don't have a ton. We're not going make the path go up and down too much. The grading is pretty minimal, so we're looking to minimize impacts along the backs of these parcels throughout between the limits shown here. I think the next section, yeah. So you can see the profile here. It's pretty flat. It's 0.8%, so it's very flat. It's very similar to the northern section of the trail. If you've walked that, you know that's very flat, very little vertical or decline, and that's what you're going to see here. So it should match into the existing condition pretty well. Once we get to Pierce Street, very similar to Bridge Street in that we're going to end up tying in. There's an existing sidewalk on the west side. One thing I did notice after we put these graphics together, so we're working to get updated survey. One thing I did notice, there's a mid-block crossing right here, an existing mid-block crossing. What I think might end up happening, I'd have to talk with the town or the city on this. We may, since there's a sidewalk on this side, but doesn't appear to be on the west side here, we may just extend this sidewalk down, connect to the path here, and then cross them here and eliminate this little portion of sidewalk, only to keep us from having two mid-block crossings within 50 feet of each other. So that might be one thought we could do. Other than that, it's very similar to Bridge Street. We aren't proposing RRFBs at this location at this time, but you will see the 3 dots where we are putting in the collapsible bollards. You'll see that collapsible bollards will be installed at every roadway and every access road through the project. The next section is Pierce Street to Stillwater Drive. Pierce Street's up on the left here, Stillwater Drive off to the right. It's very similar to the last section. You can see the profile down below here. It's very flat. We're not doing a bunch. We're not increasing grades. One thing I think I failed to point out when we were looking at profiles, these black lines that you see that I'm kind of tracing, these are existing ground lines. There's 3 of them in this case because we did one at the alignment and then a couple offsets of it, just to kind of get a better picture of what the ground is doing. So you'll see that we might be cutting through some hills in order to make the trail a little bit less impactful to the surrounding area. So that will be, you'll kind of see this hill here kind of aligns with this grassier area. So the bigger the grass areas, the larger the cuts or fills that you're going to see. The intent was to not put those large areas in the back of somebody's yard. Once we get to Stillwater Drive, very similar to the other 2. Again, no RFBs located here. We do have the trench across the road for drainage purposes. Other than that, we'll have the bollards, and that should be it at this location. Next section, Stillwater Drive to Russo Road. In between here, you can see this is actually where I got that other graphic from. Might be kind of hard to see, but this is the town line. So in the graphics itself, you get Stillwater Drive here. It's going to continue left to right on your screen and then drop down here and then continue left to right. So a couple things to point out here. As I mentioned, so we have an access drive. This is the first of the wooded entrances. Those are all set to remain. You will see the first retaining wall on the project. This is just a little 2-foot, 3-foot wall. It's really just in between the path and the railroad just to get drainage to work. But you will see a much bigger wall here and down here. Reasoning for that is, again, high fill slopes that we're trying to avoid, potential impacts to wetlands, stuff like that is the reasoning. So continuing down, like I mentioned before, kind of jumped ahead, but this is the town of Windham, city of Westbrook town line. So everything left of this and up here is all Westbrook. Everything moving forward is Windham. We start out with, this is the first of 2 stream crossings that we're going to have on the project. Inkhorn Brook. There's an existing stone arch bridge culvert that we'll get to a little bit later in the presentation, but just know that this is the location of it. Back. Excuse me, I don't know why this is jumping around on me. Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so my apologies. This is the next section. This is bringing us up to Russo Road, which is right here. So basically continuing left to right, we have a bit of a green area here. This is going to be a heavier cut. That's mostly because there's a large hill on the backside of the path at this location. Russo Road's crossing is pretty simple. I'll have a slide on that in a minute. And then other than that, we're just going to continue working the same kind of way that we had before, ditching to get the drainage where we want it, and then constructing the path. Section 3, so Stillwater Russo Road, this is that profile I was just explaining to you. So about half of this, so for you guys, this is Stillwater Drive right here. And then you're coming across left to right, same with as we saw in the graphic, very flat for the first while. And then we start getting into, this is really where the rolling terrain starts coming in. And so as you walk this is going to feel different than when you're walking the northern section. The northern section being very flat for the most part. When you start at Route 202 up to Gambo Road, at the very least, is very flat. And once you get past this section on our project, it's going to have a little bit more rolling terrain. Reason for that is this area is a little bit more geographically challenging than the previous, the northern section. So in order to minimize cuts and fills, we have to kind of raise and lower the path in order to kind of make it work. Russo Road, the simplest of the crossings. A lot of these crossings, this will look a lot very similar to what you'll see on a lot of Eastern trails when they cross smaller volume roads. No other sidewalks on Russo at this time. If they were to be added at a later date, they could be included into the design. It's very easy to add them in, but at this time, there's no sidewalks on Russo, and we're just looking to basically put a crossing right through there. Again, no RFBs, just collapsible bollards, pretty simple through there. The big section, Russo Road to Mallison Falls, I'm kind of going to skip a little bit quicker on this section, just because there's not a ton of houses on this, and it's the largest of the gaps that I have to try to cover. You can see the profile is down below, which lines up relatively well with the stationing. You'll see a couple where I keep the same profile down here, but just know that's what I'm trying to show is the kind of the rises and valleys as we go through here. So again, you'll see the blue ditching, you'll see the couple retaining walls. This on the right side is the CMP corridor that runs through there. So they'll still have access. We have an access road that goes into the CMP corridor for those of you that use that trail system. You can see that we're getting more green areas, which means we're a little bit heavier cuts and fills. And that's just due to the geography of the area. You can see some hills through here. It's not super, it's still kind of rolling terrain, but it's flattening out a little bit through here. More of the same, continuing across left to right, moving towards Mallison Falls Road. Not a whole lot to say in this section. Pretty much more of the same. Again, more of the same here. We've got a little bit of a high cut here, and we've got a woods entrance here, another high fill there. So, but we're pretty rural at this point. You can see the Presumpscot River on the top here. So we are kind of close to it in some aspects, but we're still on the, and I apologize if I never said this, we're on the north side of the existing railroad tracks for the entirety of the project until you get to the very end, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Again, more of the same. You can see that the path, this is kind of a good example. The path weaves in and out, and then it straightens out for a while. But if you see those offsets where we're weaving in and out, sometimes it's more meant to just minimize impacts to the abutting landowners and stuff like that. We're just trying to minimize impacts the best we can by moving the trail as we need to. I think we're coming up to, yeah, so this is the second stream in this in the project. So Collie Wright Brook is located right here. Again, we have a retaining wall going over the top of it, and I'll talk about Collie Wright a little bit later in the presentation. Just know, again, this is the kind of locations. It's between Russo and Mallison Falls. One other thing I want to note, there's a flag right here. I think it was in, I don't remember, 2012, I think it was, the Maine DOT had installed railroad from Bridge Street up towards the existing railroad at Route 202. Their project ended right about here. The so there's no rail from here moving forward. What we did was we essentially used the Maine DOT's right-of-way mapping and future railroad plans to figure out where the proposed rail is going to be. That way we can maintain our offsets, and it doesn't preclude adding a rail at a later date if anybody chooses to do that. So we're still maintaining those offsets. Moving forward, I think this area is where you start getting into the main correctional facility there. Yeah. So on the bottom of your screen, that's the Main State Correctional Facility. And then the path is on the top here, again, on the north side of the path, or north side of the railroad, or the future railroad, excuse me. And then on the right side of your screen, this is Madison Falls Road right here. So you can see, again, the profile stays pretty flat through majority of this, with a few hills here and there. So Madison Falls Road, one thing I wanted to point out here, we don't have an at-grade crossing. We're looking at putting a 40-foot prefabricated steel pedestrian bridge. That will keep pedestrians up at the same level. There's an existing railroad bridge right here. We're not impacting that. We're actually building at a 10.5-foot, 15-foot offset. I can't remember exactly what we were at. So that pedestrians can basically come up, over, and back to the path without having to cross Madison Falls at all. So that's kind of our plan with that. Last couple sections we're going to look at: Madison Falls Road, which is just off your screen on your left, to Depot Street. Madison Falls running left to right on your screen, and then dropping down and running left to right again. Depot Street being right here. As far as the plan goes, it's very similar to everywhere else. You see a deep cut here because you're on the backside of a hill. Other than that, there's not a ton of impacts. We're just ditching in order to get the drainage to go where we want. Excuse me. The profile through here, very flat. Nothing particularly special about that. Depot Street, this crossing is going to be a little bit more interesting than the other ones, only because the town recently did a project on Depot Street where they installed rectangular rapid flashing beacons at this location. They built sidewalks on both sides, made it look really nice. So our survey, you can kind of see some gray in there. Our survey does not include that. We are getting a survey update in order to better understand the intersection and how this is laid out. At that point, you may see a new design here, but as it currently stands, this is what we're proposing. We're trying to tie into existing or recently built sidewalks and maintain nice trail connectivity going straight across, keeping the path on the north side through this section. So the next section and the last section, Depot Street on your left, Main Street is on the top right of your screen here. You're going to keep the path on the north side all the way up to, there's an existing driveway. I think this is the fire station, and I believe they build satellite dishes in this lot here. I might be mistaken there, but I believe there might be a fire department practice facility or something over in here. This driveway essentially has access to a parcel over in here, and we're looking to kind of make use of that and cross at a similar location in case, or when the rail comes back, or if the rail comes back, they'll want to minimize as many crossings as they can. So if we put it next to the driveway, it just makes it easier for them in a future condition. So we'll cross to the south side and finish up there. The main reason that we're moving to the south side, I guess it's twofold. One is down in this corner, you'll see Black Brook. So in order to avoid impacts to Black Brook, it would make sense to move us to the other side of the rail. The second thing is that the northern section is on the south side of the trail, or the rail. So it kind of makes sense to switch over. It may be here. We did talk with the town. It may be at Depot Street. We haven't quite finalized where we're going to transfer, but this is as it's currently shown. This is what we're looking at doing. Profile through here, you can see two sections. So Depot Street's right here. So it's really looking at this section, very flat. And then this is from when we cross over the rail up to Main Street, very flat again. So that's going to look a lot like the existing rail section, or the existing trail section just north of us. As mentioned, we're on the south side now. This is Blue Seal. We're going to have a crossing location here. One thing to note, Route 202 Main Street, the town of Windham has another project going on right now where they're looking to build sidewalks and put in an RFB at this location. We're working with that project to ensure that there's no overlap and that we don't have to reset stuff at a future location, at a future time. Basically trying to minimize rework as best we can. So there'll be some changes here in the future. We're looking to kind of minimize the challenges there by working with the engineers on that. One thing to note on this top side, this is kind of a challenging location. There's an existing driveway that goes up to a house up here, and they kind of have a mixed driveway / multi-use trail entrance here. We're trying to kind of fix that by delineating the two and giving them a proper driveway without having them mixed in with the trail itself. So that's still a work in progress, but that's the idea. As mentioned before, Black Brook right here, there's a crossing, there's a culvert that goes from here to here. We're looking to avoid that. That's why we're on the south side. So that gets you through the plans. Thanks for staying with me on that. I know it's a little bit long-winded. Drainage real quick. Mostly drainage is going to be open and closed drainage. Open drainage is basically ditching. Closed drainage is using pipes and catch basins. There'll be a little bit of both, but for the most part, we're going to try to do ditching. It's just easier to maintain. The two spots that I did want to talk to you about, as mentioned before, Inkhorn Brook, which is the picture on the left, and Collie Wright Brook or Dole Brook on the right. They're both stone arch bridges. They were built quite a while ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. We've reviewed the inspection reports. The Maine DOT has actually come out and issued 2 additional WIN numbers, one for each bridge. For additional inspection, as you can see, they're starting to kind of fall apart. And so the DOT, as mentioned, they're starting to look into it. They've hired, or they're looking to hire, a structural team to investigate these 2 bridges, and we'll be kind of working with them moving forward. We don't have any information on it right now, as it's very much in its infancy, but moving forward, that's what we're trying to look at, is what shape are these culverts in, these bridges in, and how do we move forward at these 2 locations. So more to come on that, but nothing in the short term. So real quick, just want to look ahead. A couple key things. We've got utility coordination. For the most part, this project shouldn't be a huge utility issue. There's not a ton of utilities out there right now. Where we do run into utilities will be at the side roads for the most part. When we do run into utilities or have utility conflicts, what we'll look to do is try to minimize any conflicts we can, just to make it easier for everybody. If we can mitigate what we're doing out there, that'd be best for everybody involved. Next thing is environmental coordination. We have a sub-consultant on board to help us with the environmental. There's streams out there. We have wetlands that we know about. We're still getting those delineated and into our survey. But basically they're on board to help us through the environmental process. So environmental coordination with the agencies is ongoing currently. So they're going to help us through the process there. Next thing I want to just chat about real quick, the right-of-way process. The trail itself, the 10-foot wide trail, or with the 1 foot, so basically 12 feet, 10-foot paved, 1 foot gravel shoulders on either side, will be maintained within the existing railroad right-of-way. So you won't see the path outside the right-of-way. However, there will be grading outside the right-of-way. So where you see those fill lines coming down past the right-of-way, that's mostly due to the, sorry, I guess I haven't been moving enough. Light shut out on me. When you go down past the fill slopes, excuse me, that's when you get into construction easements. Basically, they'll just need to grade onto the certain properties. You'll get into drainage easements and slope easements, and all of that stuff. So there will be some easements associated with the project, but the intent is to not have permanent takes from the trail perspective. If the right-of-way process is triggered, it'll likely follow federal guidelines, just because it's the Maine DOT's right-of-way. So they'll likely be the ones doing it. Timeline. Currently the plans, as Mark had said, currently the plans are at 50%. So we call them PDR plans. We've updated them to current standards, but we're still only around 50%. What the current contract gets us up to 75%, plans impact complete. And what that basically is that's the end of the design, pencils down. So now is a good time for public input. If you guys have feelings one way or another, or things you'd like to see, this is the time to kind of get that out. as we go to the 75%, because once we get to 75%, that's usually where we drop the design portion of it and let the right-of-way team take over. It's a lengthy process to get the right-of-way completed on a project, on any project, much less a project of this size. So that's generally what it is. And just as an FYI, as Mark said, the project is not currently funded for construction. It's only funded for a partial PE right now. So it's partial design engineer is really what it's coming down to. Speaking of funding, cost for the project, currently the project looks to be around 11 million, and that's everything included. That's right-of-way cost with easements, that's design engineering fees, that's construction engineering fees, so the inspectors on site while they're doing the work, that's overall construction. Again, we're at 50%, so this was kind of a rough estimate, but that's what we're thinking. So with that, I'll kind of turn it back. This portion is going to be a bit interesting depending on who has the question. It may be one of the town or city employees. It may also be Dawn if it's somebody in person. I will pull up a PDF so I can zoom in a little better, as the PowerPoint presentation doesn't do a great job at letting me zoom in on areas. But I'll kick it back to Amanda and Mark for now, and if be happy to answer you guys' questions.
Yeah, so thanks, Jared. That was great. So yeah, we'll open up for questions, and I guess just identify yourself so that we know where the comments coming from. And we'll see. I think we have a big team to try to answer your questions as best as we can. So go ahead.
Do you want to do, there's 2 written questions right now on Zoom, and
Yeah,
just for the people on Zoom, we can, if you do want to ask a question verbally and not type it into the question and answer box, you certainly can raise your hand and we can allow you to speak. I will, just for the record, I guess I can read the comments aloud. That's a little easier just on the Zoom one. Matt Stevenson said on his property, there's a wooded entrance that is not marked here between his properties, so.
Yep. And it's good to know that if we get his name and we can take a peek at that. One thing I will note, like I said, so we're getting updated survey throughout the corridor on this. So hopefully it'll appear in the survey update, but since we have your name, we should be able to locate which parcel that is. And if we don't see it in the survey, we can reach out to him.
Deanna Barrow said she walks this section very often, also walking the existing Mountain Division Trail from Gambo to Otter Pond. Just a question in regard to the fencing. Will the fencing be maintained? She asked because near Otter Pond, the fencing is in disrepair.
I would probably kick that more to a town.
My question was gonna be to ask what type of fencing this project was gonna have.
Yeah.
So as far as the type of fencing, we actually are we've had some thoughts on it. Right now, what you see in the plans is the black PVC, so very similar to what's out there on the other section. But that doesn't mean that's exactly what's going to go in there. It's just, that's what we have in the.
Well, in
plans
Frostburg, they use I like wooden post and beam, and that is a lot easier to maintain, and also doesn't allow the vegetation to wrap itself around it as well. So
Yep. We had considered there was a cedar rail fence that we had it on the plans at one point. We pulled it just so that for simplicity's sake, but that's something we can take a look at between 50 and 75% for sure.
Did you want to, I just had a question about kind of understanding how the current trail is maintained between Windham and Standish, that there's an MOU between the town of Windham, town of Gorham, town of Standish on maintenance of the trail. So the expectation would be that would be similar for this section of trail.
And the Department of Transportation.
Yes.
and the snowmobile club.
And of course, since the Department of Transportation is funding this, they want to pave the trail.
Is there any possibility that?
Can we, yes, one person.
Yeah.
So
Can I just go?
So yeah, if someone has a question, yeah, let's try to answer that. And if this person has to ask a question, so
Yeah,
go ahead.
wait, Don, I think wanted to just jump in.
Thank you, Amanda. Just to follow up on the question on the fence type.
Yeah.
The fencing that's away from the rail line, we could do maybe cedar rail fence, that's a possibility. On steep slope areas, the retaining wall, we might need more of the chain link fence. But if we have fencing on the rail side, so if we're separating the tracks from the path, I believe the railroad's gonna require us to do the chain link fence. So-
Right, in the Freiburg section, when it comes up really close to 113, it's chain link.
Yep.
And then there are very few sections that use chain link on that section, so
We would agree the cedar rail fence is probably more aesthetically pleasing.
it's very hard to maintain the chain link fence.
All right.
I have another question now. You had made a comment about
Can you identify yourself?
Nancy. How is it, you got a 2 to 3 foot wall? It's a little wall, described as a little wall, and there's animals there. Up in this, how is an animal, a deer, gonna jump a 2 or 3 foot? I mean, how is this impacting the wildlife? This is supposed to be a nature trail. Supposed to be an improvement of nature, people walking. How are these things improving nature?
I think, you know, the walls, for example, are just over short distance, so certainly the animals can move beyond those.
They're gonna
And so,
figure out.
and it is, I mean, the trail, the purpose of the trail is blended into the environment, but it is a human right edge there, so. And we're doing environmental review to try to evaluate.
And I had another comment now, you're putting this near the railroad tracks, because at some future date. You're thinking that there's going to be a railroad. Is that correct? There could be.
No, I mean, we're putting it near the railroad because there's right of way, we can put a trail there and we'd like to have it off the road, so that's the reason why.
Well, I thought you made some comment that could be at some point be.
Well, there could be.
Okay, 'cause- Okay, so that's another reason, because there is some requirement that the distance between trail has to be from a railroad. There's some state
Mhm.
requirement, I think it's 11 feet.
And I
And
think,
you
yeah,
have to
Jared
rotate
mentioned what that was, so.
Yeah, so
Right.
the distance between the nearest rail and the nearest edge of path is technically 15 feet. But you can go down to 10.5 feet, which is probably where you get the close to 11 foot there, under certain stipulations. Which is why we're working with the Maine DOT and their railroad department to ensure that in areas where we drop down, we meet the criterion.
So, you want me to move to the next question?
So this path basically divides the land that we own. And with the fence, Michael Squires. Will there be provisions to not prevent us from going to the second half of our land through the fence?
Jared, do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear that one, sorry.
The question has to do with fencing, and there may be abutters that own on both sides of the trail and the tracks. And with
Yes.
fencing for access, so the answer is no. We're not planning on putting fencing continuously on the trail. It's only in areas where we need it. If you have access, if you have property on both sides of the railroad corridor, we would assume you have some type of access driveway across the tracks to get access to that other parcel, because it's probably
No,
landlocked by the wall, by the.
it is landlocked,
Okay.
but basically you just walk up a relatively semi-steep slope.
Okay, so we can work with you, if we understand your location.
We're actually right here.
Yeah,
But you did say that you need a fence between the pathway and the rails, or?
only if they're too close, only if we're putting the trails too close, so we will not have a continuous fence through the whole project.
Gotcha.
So we'll try to keep the trail away from the tracks to meet standards, then we don't need a fence. But if we have to squeeze it tight, then we need to put a fence in. There will be still crossings of roads and driveways, and those areas will have breaks.
Could I actually extend it right away, so you guys actually go on my property to avoid putting a fence? That'd be an option.
That's a great question. Our goal was not to place the trail on anybody's property. If we're going through that process, if there's federal money on this project, which I think it's both communities' home, that as we get through this process, that the state and federal government will step in and fund, hopefully, a majority of the project. And then that kicks you into a federal right-of-way process. So if we move the trail absolutely onto your property, there would be damages and compensation to put the trail there. So our first goal is to keep it inside the right-of-way as much as possible. Not to say that on a case-by-case basis, we could not work.
Okay.
Bruce Elder, we have property both sides of the railroad track, and we do have a road that crosses, and so you're right on that topic. What's the width of the railroad right of way?
It varies throughout the project, depending on what section you're in. I'd have to look back at the PDR. And there's sections that are 60, there's sections that are a little bit bigger. I don't recall off the top of my head exactly what it is.
We're just above the Russo Road. Our road is a few hundred feet to the Windham side of the Russo Road. And we're concerned about access to that piece to the riverside. So I guess I'd want to know what limitations there might be as this comes through in terms of development perhaps, because there's land enough for the riverside that it wouldn't be us, but our next generation might very well want to. There's probably 4.5 or 5 acres between the railroad and the river right there. There's another parcel that we own that has a little less than that. So whatever the restrictions might be is certainly a concern that we have, and I'm sure neighbors have similar situations.
Yeah, so I didn't catch your name and I apologize for that.
Bruce Elder.
Okay, so I don't know, can you guys still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah,
So I believe this is the property right here. I see Bruce Elder here and one right here. And the right-of-way lines are going like this, if you can see my mouse. So we do have currently, I don't know how many crossings you have in your parcel, but I can see one for sure right here that was flagged in the old right-of-way railroad tie track crossing. We are maintaining that. If there's a certain width that you would need to get through there, I mean, that's a conversation we can have. We were just basically holding the width of the ties and going a little bit wider than what was out there currently. But the intent would be to, if there's access to be maintained, we're not looking to create difficulties there.
but correct me if I'm wrong, but any future crossings, just like you'd have to do today, is a licensing agreement with DOT. And if the trail was constructed and you later wanted to cross it, you could do that and go through that same permitting process.
Yeah,
And I would add to it that not only for that development, not only are you crossing the trail, but you're crossing the railroad track, so
Yeah.
you need the approvals to cross. You'll have a harder time probably getting approval to cross the railroad tracks than you will need to cross the trail.
I have to get rid of your firstborn.
Yeah. See what you're back there.
I'm just wondering if landowners can request. Oh, I'm Trisha Tomkus. We have, we're right next to Elders actually. And I'm wondering if landowners can request fences, because like that area with the CMP corridor, that must be a really old picture. But that is our property and we have a hoop house out there and gardens. And our daughter has a camper bus that she camps out in overnight, and it just overlooks, you know, it's really open, so there's gonna be a huge change in privacy and security concerns.
so are you,
So,
sorry, you're on the south side of the rail currently, is that correct?
yep,
Okay, so I think we just, I think.
so
our
that
area-
open, the CMP corridor is, that's all our property in our field.
Yep.
They have that right away, but we own that property, and that's where we have a camper bus and a greenhouse. And a bunch of different things out there, and it's very open view when you walk by on the railroad tracks currently, so I just really worry about it. Kind of inviting people in, you know.
Yep, it does look like we currently have proposed section of fence along here. It's not for anything related to the corridor or anything. It has to do with likely at this point, because of how close we are, we're close to the rail, so we had to put a fence in anyway.
It doesn't look like it goes quite all the way though, it looks like it maybe starts in the middle there.
Yeah, it starts right about in the middle of the pole line there. I think actually I don't think our aerial goes up far enough. It should be a 2021 aerial, so it should be new, but I will say that it may just be that the actual what you're talking about is up just off screen or something.
So who would we be in, I'm sorry, same
Go ahead.
question, but who would we be in contact with in the future to see if it would be possible to extend that section of fence and to possibly put up like no trespassing signs and things like that?
I mean, we could take, we're receiving your comment and we can look at that area in more detail, but, I guess like Don had said, I mean, there's certain requirements where we need to have fence and others where you don't need fence, so, we'll take a look at that area, and see what would make sense.
Yeah, I'm David Sparks, president of the Russo Road Association. Russo Road is not a public road, it's a private road. The only people that have access to it are the residents and their visitors and the town of Windham. We maintain the road, we pave it, so we don't really want a lot of cars coming down there to park to use the trail, so we would request you to put up no parking signs on both sides of the road to keep the public off the road.
Yeah, and
We have concern, and also there's other residences there that they have their lawns abutting where the path would be. And they're also concerned about people coming onto their property, so they would request a fence along with the property lines. So that the public wouldn't be coming onto their property.
I have
So-
a suggestion to that too.
That would, I think what
Go ahead.
Jared answered.
Yep.
Sorry, what was that?
Did you have a response to that?
Oh, yes. So twofold. One, as far as the parking goes, that's something we'll take notes of it now. It's a good point. Russo Road's pretty narrow anyway, so you really don't want parking on a road that narrow to begin with. So we'll take a look at that for sure. As far as the additional fencing, I assume that we're talking more about potentially these parcels here, just because that's the side the path is on. Going back to what Mark said with the fencing, currently what we're proposing as far as fencing goes is wherever we're required to put fencing. However, if there's right-of-way impacts to the parcels, that may be something that you can handle out in the right-of-way negotiations as far as construction easements and stuff like that. Don, you may have a better or a more in-depth answer than that. That would be my thought.
Would it be my understanding that fencing would be between the rails and the path the whole way?
No.
No.
We're gonna put it where we need to. If the trail is, if we design the trail too close to the railroad will require us to put fencing. So we have sections where we need fencing between the two,
Okay.
but it's our goal to kind of separate them so we don't need fencing. On the outside of the trail, on the property owner side of the trail, and again, Jared's been referring to north-south, I like to say west-east. The river's on the west side, you've got the railroad, we're putting the trail on the east side, on the non-river side of the railroad tracks, that's what we're doing. So, if we have steep grades in that area, we're gonna put a retaining wall in near a drainage structure or heavy fill. We'll put a fence in that area to protect bicyclists that are using the trail and walkers from slipping off a steep edge. We're not intending to fence it necessarily for privacy or because the butter wants it. What I would tell you, these are 50% design. We have a long ways to go. If you have concerns about fencing near your property, I would bring it up to Mark, to the town or to the city, whatever community you live in. And town officials will take it under advisement moving forward. We'll kind of look at it as a case by case basis. I will also tell you when and if the project gets funded for construction and they go through the right of way process. The right of way appraiser will be meeting with each property owner that has impacts. And those are times when you can bring those requests up. Hey, I really am concerned for this reason, can you accommodate this request? So you're gonna have 3 or 4 more tries at this before we get to the end. We will come back for another public meeting when we get closer to 75% design. So we're collecting comments now, we'll come back later in the year. with kind of a revised design, you guys can take a look at it, and then there's still a long process from there to go through, so. If there are individual requests for things like that, I would encourage you to speak with your town officials.
Yeah, we've already gotten some emails, with concerns, on the project, so if you. In the next, week or so, if you have. If you don't voice, you can email, I think my email address is on there, and you got other.
Jeff, you.
Well,
The phone's here.
you can find it, and it's also. I know. So, we got several questions here, I'm gonna try to be fair, but, for the blue shirt.
Yeah, Bill Plumley, 46 Main Street, Windham. First, a quick follow-up on David's question and answer, and then my own. I think you can consider David giving you notice that it's an issue. He shouldn't have to come back to the town later and say it's an issue. You just want to say that.
Yeah, no, and so that's why, again, we are recording this, we are taking note, and so we'll incorporate these comments,
And my question is, so we live at 46 Main Street, where the end of our driveway is also part of the trail. So far, that's worked. There's been some close calls. But I think I heard you say that you were going to try to separate the trail from the driveway. There's no room on the other side. The only way that can happen, in my mind, is for you to relocate the mouth of our driveway to the south. And my concern is that we have infrastructure south of the driveway in the form of lawn, garden, stone monolith. There's also a topographical problem with it as you get into the fall off the Black Brook. So I need to see more soon about the plan for separating the trail from our driveway. We love being stewards of the trail, living along the trail, it's a great thing. There are problems sometimes, sure. Overall, it's a big asset to the whole region. But I'm gonna need to see plans for how you're gonna separate the trail from the driveway. It sounds to me like you want to move the driveway, change the topography, and supplant the infrastructure we already have.
I think that area, I mean, we'll definitely take a close look at that, because there are some, conflicting spaces there that, with the trail and driveways, so we will, definitely consider, your comments, and thank you.
And-
Hi, Steve Higgins, I'm in a butter on Russo Road. And I guess the next question is, Russo Road showed a fairly substantial cut that goes beyond the actual DOT property lines. How is that going to be taken care of with the property owners?
So that comes back to the DOT's right away. In theory, again, assuming the DOT is the one doing the right away, which we're pretty confident that would be the case. That goes back to what Don was saying with it would be a construction easement in which the DOT would send an assessor out to get value of the impact, and then would sit down with the property owner. I believe it's multiple times. Don, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And basically they'd work with you to kind of figure out, okay, how do we mitigate these impacts and how to move forward. But you'll get a couple stabs at how you want to move forward with the impacts. And again, we're at 50% plans now. Ideally between 50 and 75%, if we can mitigate impacts further, that's what we're going to try to do. This is kind of our first swing at it. So Don, if you have anything to add as far as the right of way, I know you're a little bit more in depth with that than I am.
A little bit more in reference to the crossing at Russo Road. If you're looking at the map and you come down a little bit on the left-hand side, you see a little bit of like a little turnaround.
Are you talking on the
Little bit, right,
Yeah, little circle.
the little circle,
No,
Other side of the track,
the other side,
right to the left of Stephen.
right there.
Gotcha.
That was originally a planned school bus turnaround that's been non-existent forever and a day now. And already we have a lot of people that come down and park there to walk the railroad tracks. I also am a little concerned, I own that property and I'm a little concerned about this is just going to greatly impact the amount of people that want to come down to be able to walk the trail system down through there. Well, I'm sure that that's something that we can look at and deal with at some point in time. The other issue that I have is at that turnaround, from that point going to the railroad tracks, there is a steep drop in grade that goes down. So I'm kind of curious how you're going to have to dig that whole Russo Road section way back to change the grade. And then come down and make a flat spot and then another flat spot for the railroad tracks. I'm a little confused about how that would actually work out.
Jared, I can take a stab at this, Jared. So the crossing of Russo Road will be at grade, so the pavement grade, the tracks will match that grade.
Okay,
And then if you're standing at that crossing on Russo Road and you look down there are tracks here, right?
Okay.
Look down the tracks in one direction, down the tracks in the other direction. We're gonna be building a trail on your side,
Correct.
the tracks,
right,
at about the same grade as that.
sure,
So when you stand there, look what's happening with the embankment. I'm not positive, I got the plans. I think you have your tracks and to your land, I think it slopes up.
it does greatly, yeah,
So what we're gonna do is we gotta take that material away to build the tracks there and then we slope it up. So that's what you're seeing in all that green area.
right,
So right now, it's in a tunnel, I guess the tracks are, when you look down the tracks. We're gonna make that wider to put the trail in, and then
Yes.
we've gotta grade that slope back up.
so then in fact, you will be grading the road itself.
At the railroad crossing, the grade of the tracks at Russo Road will be the same grade for our trail.
At the tracks, so
Yeah,
the road goes right uphill.
Yeah,
Is it
Right,
like
right at the
steep?
tracks, yeah.
you got the railroad tracks here, and just as soon as you go across the railroad tracks,
You
the
go
road just
uphill.
Okay.
turns right up.
Let us-
And you got this whole section of what, 10, 14, 15, 20 feet?
Yeah, so if the road is not at 2% coming off those tracks, we will have to make it 2%. We wanna
Right.
make the trail ADA compliant, so we'll make it, that's a good comment, we'll make a note of that, we'll spend a little bit of time looking at Russo Road in that area. To see how we get it.
Is there some way that I can be on
Yes.
part with that? Because that's very important to me, because I visualize that you're gonna have to bring that grade way back across my property line, just to make the grade coming down the trail. Maybe not, I don't know.
The one going along with that with Russo Road, we would also have concerns if you're bringing in construction
That's
equipment
going there.
on Russo Road. We pay to maintain that. We pave that road.
So
we-
if it's a.
We would want to be compensated.
Right, if
for-
it's a private road.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Then I don't think the contractor has access to that. So they're gonna have to use the public roads to get access to the trail. You bring up a very good point. We're building a trail along a railroad corridor and construction access and constructability will be challenging. So they're gonna build from one public road, they're gonna build it down and from the other. And if it's Russo Road's private road, unless your association allows access, we'll have stipulations in our contract that says no contract.
If they wanted to pay to further that road over, we'd be happy.
It's interesting you say that. You may get a contract that takes you up on that offer.
Oh, geez. Steve Higgins, David Sparks.
What I would say is in our contract, when this
Yeah.
eventually goes out to bid and contractors bid on it, we're more than likely gonna restrict contractor access from Russo Road, because it's a private road. However, when the contractor mobilizes, you may approach him or he may approach you and say, what would it take for us to use your road for access temporarily? It may that, their side deals that happen all the time. It won't be part of this contract.
Sure, right,
But it
right.
could happen after the
Yeah.
fact.
Based on river, down the
But we'll take a look, we will take a look at that crossing again, based on your comments.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Can we just take a few maybe from Zoom?
Okay,
Yeah.
Hold your
Yeah.
breath in just for a moment.
Because there's a 13 waiting now. So one question from Ian Riley, it says that the trail is not being built on top of the pre-existing railroad system. How close is the trail from the existing property lines on Pierce Street? I don't know if we can jump into that.
Was that on Pierce Street, they said?
Yeah,
Excuse me.
Let's see, that's Russo. Pierce is right here. So I mean, we're probably talking, in this location, probably 20 feet off the rail is the furthest we would impact as far as the actual trail goes. 25 because you got 10 feet here and another 10 feet there is what it's looking like. So it would be, we're kind of maxing out the right of way in this area. So we'll be, I don't know if was this parcel or which parcel we're talking about specifically, but around this section, we're probably 20 to 25 foot closer than the nearest rail.
The red dash line, Jared, in that area represents the right of way, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's pink, but it shows up red here, I think.
Okay. Paul Carr asks, have options other than asphalt pavement and research for the pathway, thinking of ongoing maintenance and other environmental considerations?
Yeah, so
Jerry,
Mark had
well,
actually talked to us
Mark-
about that. He had spoke with Jerry, the main DOT rep, on that. We're actually looking into that kind of going forward. Paved is ideal from the perspective of it's the lowest maintenance, and it resists some of the wear and tear the drainage would have better than some of the other products, but it is something that we're looking at.
With the goal that the surface needs to meet the ADA requirements.
Correct. Yeah, the goal would need to be ADA access, ADA requirements, so compact, densely compacted, non-slip, stuff like that.
Okay, 2 questions from Mike Lynch. Well, one's a comment really, more just that the reason for all the questions on the fence is because the north section fence are in considerable disrepair. The new section needs to be much better than what is currently on the north section. And then he had a question, so with all these steps which still need to be done and the $11 million cost, when should we really expect to be able to ride or walk on this new section? All your legislators? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm gonna let somebody else handle this one.
Do you guys
Don't know
know?
off the top of my head.
I mean, I don't think we know. We really don't know at this point. I mean, we're just doing a preliminary design. We're getting comments. And they're like, I think Don and or Jared mentioned, we have a ways to go. We're gonna try to incorporate what we can here to move to the next phase of the stage of design. And then, once that process is completed, then we'll be looking for funding, but really, there's not a really any answer that could be that close to accurate at this point. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, so the milestone we're at now, 50% design, draft preliminary design report, final preliminary design report is important for Maine DOT. They like to see that cost, that high cost, they like to see what do we think this might cost? And then they start working with the municipalities to say, can we fund this with a combination of federal money, state money, local match? And if that's successful, it would fall into their DOT's 3-year work plan. So at that point, there's funding allocated for it. And it usually takes about 3 years to go through that formal process before you actually see a contractor out there doing this. So it could be at a minimum 3 years, 4 years, 5 years before somebody's walking on the trail.
When you project out as Tom Mahon, Westbrook. When you project out your estimates for construction, do you add in what you think a reasonable amount of time is going to be and what those prices will be at the end of that 3-year, 5-year, 10-year period? Is that what that $11 million represents? Is that estimation?
That $11 million represents present value dollars.
Okay.
Okay,
And
so,
it's significantly higher than what we saw in 2012.
Oh, yes.
Anybody that's in the construction industry knows in the last 3 to 5 years, construction costs are up. Due to labor shortage, due to material shortages. So Maine DOT, they do factor that into their work plan as they move forward. But the numbers we're talking are present value.
have they done a projection?
Hold on.
What it's gonna cost the taxpayer?
A lady at the back is having her hand up.
Yeah.
Holly Dickinson, Amazon, 90 River Road. So, we have an access road to Anderson Cemetery. that is the right of way already. Anderson Cemetery is highly abused. So my concern is, one, how do you monitor people accessing the property going into Anderson as a 15-year D2 following? It's pretty significant. How can you monitor access from the trail onto the property that way? And I'm a user of the trail, but I'm also a respectful user of the trail, and I see the abuses that happen on a regular basis, just when I'm walking, Campbell or whatever. Who is responsible for the feces that develop in mass quantity during the course of the summer months? And the abuses that happen with beer being brought in, parties happening. I already have issues with the fire pit that was created down on my waterfront. And they're accessing from water. So how can you protect the abutters from, one, abuses that are already occurring, and two, for just really disrespectful persons using the trail?
I think maybe try to answer to that. Go ahead, if you wanna.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say, we know we have similar experiences on the northern section that's constructed. We recognize that kind of abuses reduce when there are more users. People police themselves. They are better behaved when more people are around. I think that's what we're hoping to see here. But certainly more things happen when we know about the problem. So there will be staff you would call at the town office to kind of report those things. If it's a trespassing issue, that's certainly a police issue. So that happens today when there are people that are running ATVs down the trail or accessing private property from the trail. That is not the intended use, and there are avenues to follow through on that.
Would it be possible for police on bicycles from time to time?
Yeah. I think that's a comment that we should keep track of, sort of what the outreach is. I think it goes along with maintenance and the staffing to maintain the trail system.
Well, can I just kind of, I think the intent of the question was, this trail is gonna allow access for people who might not be there now, so invite more people. Could there be additional police or firefighter funding to help police that path, I guess, that part of this part is all.
No, we'll be honest.
Yeah.
We promised you something.
I didn't.
But, I mean,
I think that's kind of like.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's more that, again, to Amanda's point, the more that people are using us, and, again, you've got a lot of people that are very excited about utilization of this all the way from Westbrook, to Sebago Lake. So I think more people on it are going to police themselves in some respects. We won't be able to take care of all of them, but it's no respect. It's when it's not open, when it's dark. Yeah, the abuse is happening.
I mean, people can use access to the trail now. I mean, it's not a trail now, but the rail anyways, so. And there's no one out there looking at it for policing. There's not other people. that there to-
Okay.
Maybe up front? Yeah.
Bruce Wallingford, I'm a Westbrook resident. Can we use the trail now?
Here. I mean, it's not a public trail. I mean, it's a rail line, so.
If they're gonna allow us to use it in the future, are we allowed to use it now? Is that
People do use it now.
I know, I
live
just,
on Myrtle Street and they walk up and down
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I might have been on the trail once or twice myself. I just wonder if we actually had permission to be on the trail.
I mean, it's DOT property. I guess I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Jerry is available.
Oh, Jerry's got the answer, isn't it? Because there's not a train operating, right?
This is Nate Howard. I can answer that question. I'm the rail director, Maine DOT. So
Thank you.
answer is no. Unfortunately, under state law, it's trespassing. So you can't walk on the line now or ride a horse or an ATV. You know, if there was an agreement with Westbrook or Windham for a trail, that changes things. But right now, any use is considered trespassing. Again, DOT, we don't have rail police. So if it's reported to us, we rely on either the warden service for ATVs or the local PD for other types of trespassing.
Thank you.
Hope that helps. Yeah.
Amanda, Barry Bernard, I know we're talking about, construction activities, but and the impacts on butters. I was wondering about who would be allowed to use this trail right now, and I represent the Snowmobile Club in Windham. Windham has the most snowmobiles in the state of Maine, and we have access permissions from the Maine DOT that we get every year for our section. So does Westbrook, so does Gorham, so does Standish. So all of the local snowmobile clubs, maintain, a lot of that already, with permission from the DOT. And is there any change in usage that, I know we're talking construction and a butter impacts, but I didn't know if there was any discussion yet on usage. And you talked about the bollards, for example. Right now, we every fall, we go and we remove the bollards so that snowmobile can go through, and then we put them back in springtime. We're talking about steel bollards, would still be able to do that. And then also with respect to she's gone. But the self-policing, we do an awful lot because, we only exist through the grace of our landowners. And, if we have people abusing the trails, people out there doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, all it will do is negatively impact us, potentially shut a section of the trail down. So back to the self-policing comments that were made, we do that like crazy. We were on speed dial with the warden service. We do a lot on Facebook. We have public meetings. We talk about issues like that because we want to be an asset to the community and not a bunch of hooligans out in the woods in the middle of the night. So I don't know if there are any answers in terms of usage of the trail or if that's way too early.
No.
I would think it would be similar to the northern section, the section that's already there now. And as far as the bollards go, I mean, they're going to be collapsible bollards so that they can be put down during the winter.
Good. My goal is
They just laid it.
More key and.
Alan Goodman, we've been up with the hill for the last 80 years. Do you plan on replacing the rail that was ripped up from the Westbrook side, the prison, up to 202? They ripped all that up. You're gonna redo that? Okay.
Not part of this project. And I mean, I think we're putting the trail
out of this project
putting
down the road.
Excuse me.
Will it be? No.
No, I mean, it's not part of the project here, and we're putting the trail next to the rail because the DOT, I know, wants to at least maintain the ability to put rail in the future if the decision.
There was some excellent articles in the Portland paper today about rail in Maine.
Yeah, so.
You may want to read them.
Yeah, well, definitely will do that, but I think
We've spent what, $8 million on a Tiger grant to bring the track out of Westbrook. Now we want 11 million more just for design.
No, that includes the construction.
I guess,
So anyways, yeah, the rail is not being, the ability to put rail in is not being taken away by putting this trail in.
okay, so they could sometime down the road say, hey, we're gonna turn it back into a railroad.
That's correct.
And trail is still the.
Yeah.
Right, but if you turned it into a rail, the towns are responsible for the crossings. That crossing up on Main Street's gotta be a $300,000 crossing. And the town's big pay and buy.
Yeah, if I could jump in real quick, the tracks were pulled out years ago, and then they were put back in some 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it didn't get all the way to Main Street, Windham. The intent was to try to reinstall the tracks all the way up to Main
The $8
Street.
million was full.
And they ran out of funds, so they only made it as far as they did. This project is looking at focusing on the trail itself. but we have folks like Nate Howard and Jerry Dosty here from DOT. That could be a separate project. It's unrelated to the work we're doing. We're making sure that we design the trail such that the tracks could be finished up to Main
There's
Street
some interesting terrain out there.
if they want to do that. So, but backing up what Mark said, the focus of this project is the trail up to Main Street. But there could be a separate project looking at tracks up to Main Street, so.
Yes, Joe Carmen, 114 Ridge Road. I have pretty much the same concerns as anyone else. I got property on both sides. And so the fencing and maybe having a gate. I also have a vegetable field only 50 feet from the tracks, and the trail's gonna come onto that side, so we're gonna open up my vegetable field to anyone walking on the trail. The other concern is my access to the river for irrigation. That's how I irrigate my vegetables. And there's a lot of my property, and if you're going on the side, I think, well, it doesn't matter what side of the railroad tracks, it's very steep. You're gonna have to put a lot of fill in, which is gonna come beyond the right of way, I think. Because the railroad tracks are there, and then it sits like this. So there's some concern.
If I could just follow up on that, you're correct. We have some areas where the tracks are high and the land is low. We're installing a trail next to the tracks, and we're gonna have to chase that slope out. That's where you see these big green areas. That's areas where that might be happening, either a high fill or a high cut. You may see some areas where we minimize that by putting a wall. Right, so some of those culverts that Jared showed earlier, those old historic arch culverts, we may be putting walls in those areas to minimize the impact and having.
If he goes back, you can see my last vegetable field. Right there. I mean, and you're gonna put the trail there, I mean. People are gonna see that field, and I mean, can I request fencing and a gate to keep people out? Because I've had people come in and. They, help themselves do vegetables over the years already, but now with more traffic. And then just another comment is. What about hunting? Cause I hunt on both sides of the property. Is hunting still gonna be allowed? Near there or?
Jared, do you want to show the access on that parcel to the riverside?
Are we talking this one?
Yeah,
Yeah, the crossing's right there.
Yeah.
so we're maintaining that crossing.
Yeah.
You'll have access to go on the other
But
side.
can I require fencing and a gate is my question.
Your comment about the gate is interesting because we talked about access for snowmobiles, we're probably not gonna allow access for four-wheelers. And so we need to think that through a little bit as we go through this project. All these private drives, if four-wheelers can get down in there, we don't necessarily want them getting out onto the trail. We're either gonna have to install the bollards at every one of these gravel.
But I mean,
field
even if
crossings,
it was a gate.
or a gate on
If I
property
really
owners.
want a key, if I wanna
So,
cut wood on the other side.
yeah, I made a note of that.
Cross or something,
We wanna-
I just don't want people to say, hey, look, there's a pepper field here, let's go pick a look at that.
Yeah, well, we're gonna give that some thought. It's a good comment.
Cindy Elder. I'm just wondering if the purpose of this fence is to protect people walking on the trail from the train. And if there are no trains, why do we need a fence?
So the two things, the fence on, obviously the fence in between, I assume the fence you're talking about is the fence in between the path itself and the rail.
Right.
Really what it is, it's DOT standard for rails with trails guidance, that if we get within a certain distance of a trail or of the rail, the nearest rail, we need to maintain a certain level of separation. If we can't maintain that, that's when the fence comes in. It's really for trespass. It's somewhat for trespass, but it's just so that people aren't wandering from the trail across the rail in an area where a train may strike them. Granted, as you mentioned, the train doesn't run through this section, but we're building the trail basically. Building this trail does not preclude the ability to install a rail at a later time. So we're trying to design it in the way that if the rail came in, again, not knowing when this project or a future rail project, if there is one, comes in, we're designing it for the condition in which the rails and us are in there at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, could you please review the timeline? I know you mentioned just, and I'm not trying to pin you down here, but just projections for the 75% completion, 100% completion. I'm asking because this project's ripe for federal earmark and just trying to look ahead to the future.
Yeah, I think.
By the way, I just want to add, I think the project cost should include a farm stand for this guy.
Turn it into
75% in like a year.
Yeah, so we'll spend the rest of this year working on progressing the design, so in the next 6 to 12 months, a little bit to Mark, but I think that's what we're trying to target. To be able to get the plans up to 75%. We'll have another public meeting between now and then.
So maybe 24 months for 100%.
The funding is the big thing, so that will get us to a milestone where the right of way process could start. But we really need funding for right of way. They'd have to fund the whole project to move forward with right of way. They wouldn't want to go through the right of way process if the project was not funded for construction.
So you're gonna need a second round of fundraising to get to that 100% shovel ready mark.
Was yes, the answer to the question, yes.
Right.
And
So
we're hoping it's
100% project, not in phases.
We're looking to actually package that 100% and construction in whatever we're gonna go for. So if it's a federal, the next federal funding or whichever one, it's gonna be an inclusive of 100% and construction.
Right.
So, yeah.
Is the drawings that are available for public at this point?
Yeah, it's available on the website, the town of Windham. I think it's the Parks and Rec Department.
No, it's there's a short URL that we gave. It's at the front, but it's essentially the Parks and Rec page for the Mountain Division Trail. If Jared, I can at least bump you off of your screen share and I could at least show people if you hadn't been, if for those online, if you registered for this meeting, you had to go, I think, to the website, but it's the Parks and Rec website for the Mountain Division Trail. So it has information about the existing trail, but kind of at the bottom here is information about this meeting. And here are the preliminary draft report and plans. And we will add here the PowerPoint presentation, the video recording, and these color plan sets.
If we were notified about this meeting, can we assume that as things progress, we will continue to be notified?
Yeah, if you're on the list,
And we're also planning.
Right.
I'm assuming you keep us informed.
Were there questions online that you need?
Yes. Yeah, there are questions about, oh, well, let me read this one. Nanine Chase Ortiz, you mentioned the trail grade itself is ADA compliant. You want to confirm the bollards as movable still allow for wheelchair or recumbent bike users to get on the trail?
Yes, correct.
Okay, yeah, mentioned that the Mike Chase Ortiz, you mentioned that the number of sections that are built up 30 feet or more with nowhere near the 11-foot distance between the rail and the proposed trail. How will the trail be built up and the sides protected from people falling a great distance? That's
Yeah, so the embankment, the steep embankment will be pushed out, so we have a plateau to put the trail on top, and then we'll protect the slope from the users by some form of fence.
Erica Bell Watkins also says she's concerned about parking. She's on the Gamble Road section and parking issues are already a large problem. She says trespassing issues decreased after the trail use increased in her experience. There was another question that, Mike Lynch said, great plans, but I don't see any place on these plans for parking. Gambo has lots of parking. Where would people who want to walk or ride actually park along Bridge Street? Could easily be 15+ cars parked at any time.
Yeah, that's a great comment.
Yeah, a safety concern for you. I don't know when the last time somebody really inspected the trestle at Acorn Brook, but I walk down there every week. And it's progressing on a weekly basis. And at the very top where the rails are now, just in the last few weeks, I can stick my cane all the way down and not touch the bottom underneath the rails. So if you're gonna haul any equipment down there or snowmobiles in the wintertime or anything else, you might wanna put up some warning signs, because I hesitate even walking across that right now. It's compromised. It's gonna go.
It's a great comment. So we've actually, we spoke to the DOT about it when we had our geotechs out taking boring samples. They noticed a similar thing. And so we notified the DOT, and that's what, earlier in the presentation, I had mentioned that there's 2 additional wind numbers, basically 2 separate projects, one looking at Inkhorn Brook, one looking at Collie Wright Brook, and reviewing the structural analysis of the existing culverts. The last inspection was done a couple years back, and it was noted that it was in poor condition. So as you mentioned, if it's deteriorating, we'll know more as those 2 individual projects progress. But yeah, it's a great comment. We'll add it to our list here.
One more question on here. Mike Lynch said the Lincoln Street project in Westbrook is supposed to have a trail hook into the current and future trail. Is there a process to hook other new trails into this new mountain division section?
That as they come along, we would clearly, want to make sure to make the connections, but I don't think there's any other major connections we're looking at right now in Westbrook, outside of Lincoln Street.
And not in Windham either.
Yeah. But thank you, Mike.
Another Mike Teeth Ortiz, Stillwater Drive in Westbrook is also a private road maintained by our HOA with the trail crossing the street. They had the same concern as folks on Rousseau Road.
Yep, it's good to know.
So the last one on here for now, Charlotte Dench, is it possible to consider placing the Pierce Street section of the trail on the other side of the railroad tracks? And what are the encircled blue arrows indicating on the edge of the Leighton Latini property in section 2 heading north on the Pierce Street section? Yeah. I hope Jared knew what I was describing, drainage lines.
Yeah, it's the dark blue is all drainage. I don't specifically, if they're circled, basically all that means is that it's riprap. It just means that it's stone, ditch, which I assume is what she meant by the bubbles. But yeah, basically all that is, it's a riprap. We've taken an initial glance at and riprap, for those of you who don't know, it's just larger stone. It's helped to keep velocities of the water lower so they don't erode the ditches. Wouldn't do us much good to put ditching if it erodes away immediately. So the larger stone is basically just there to keep it from eroding, but that's probably what we're looking at. They said Leighton, yeah. So I think I'm not sharing anymore. Well, I'm looking on my screen. I believe that's what we're talking about. So there's a catch basin, which is the solid blue square. And then there's 2 blue parallel lines. That's just a drainage pipe. And the bubbles with the arrows is just a ditch line that's protected with large stones.
You can share your screen if you want. But really the consideration for what side of the trail to be on versus the track was.
Location. I mean, that's where we had right of way.
Yeah. Where there's space.
Yes.
All right, that's the end of the Zoom questions waiting unless there's anyone that wants to raise their hand. Is there anyone else in the room?
Will this project still continue after Congress's vote tonight on whether or not we'll get past?
I think.
No, you
we'll
don't need to
finish the preliminary plan. We've got budgeted money for this effort.
Yeah, I guess there aren't any more questions. Thank you very much all for coming, and like we were saying, we captured your comments. And we'll try to address them the best we can, considering the standards that we need to meet for this type of a trail. And obviously the budget constraint as well, but we will be working on developing the design for the next stage. Completing field work, and we will keep things up to date as far as where we're at, so that you can follow along and so that when we have our next public meeting that you can attend. Thank you.
Thanks for the.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having us.
John.